Fred the Elf, a Christian Christmas story by Whitney Stapler. For Blake and Adeline, may you never lose the magic of Christmas. Have you heard the tale of Fred the Elf, the little fellow from Gumdrop Lane? On the night he was born, everything changed. The North Pole was never, ever the same. To celebrate his birth, all joined in merry tune. Jolly smiles painted each cherry-red face. Proud Santa lit up the town so bright, NASA spotted them in outer space. You could say they had a feeling Fred was special. One of a kind, few and far between. All who lived around the North Pole would tell you. Fred was the smartest baby elf they'd ever seen. It didn't take long until Fred really blossomed and became a little elf engineer. He went to luncheons, special meetings with Santa. He even won Best Toy of the Year. But, although Fred had a room full of awards, although he had hundreds of ribbons on his wall, there was just one recognition he wanted most of all. You see, Santa keeps an important tradition. Every year he chooses a special elf to ride in his sleigh. This became something Fred the Elf expected. So he got more excited each passing day. Fred stopped having time to help his friends. If anyone had a problem, no, he wouldn't hear it. He became so occupied with his hopes and prospects, his plans and projects, that he lost his Christmas spirit. On the night of Christmas Eve, Fred glistened with knowing eyes. He stood and waited for Santa to announce he'd get the prize. But Fred the Elf was wrong. Santa did not call out his name. He became so very angry, his face turned red in shame. And on that night of Christmas Eve, in a town filled with the happiest of cheer, Fred the Elf did something that was unheard of. He shed a tiny tear. Fred cried, "Boo-hoo, boo-hoo, what a terrible heart-ripper." The poor little elf bolted so quickly, he lost a curly-toed slipper. He ran to Gumdrop Lane to hide, into his room to grieve, while all the other elves were out celebrating Christmas Eve. January was the month of rest, but Fred the Elf feigned sleep. For how could Santa break his heart and just leave it in a heap? In February he was still sad. But in March, he started to change. He realized he'd been selfish, so his priorities got rearranged. All that year when he wasn't inventing, he'd help with chores and clean. He asked forgiveness from his friends. He was ashamed he'd been so mean. He took time to pet the reindeer. And oh, how he'd make Santa's boots shine. Fred the Elf realized inventing was fun, but his friends came first in line. The very next Christmas Eve as the elves gathered in the square, Fred the Elf was a cheery boy who danced in the snowy air. And as Santa announced the winner was his friend Snowflake, Fred the Elf felt a start. For a tingling, warm, happy feeling had taken over his heart. But then Santa looked around to announce, "This year, there's been a change. There is another sleigh rider tonight. Fred the Elf, from Gumdrop Lane." Fred's mouth dropped open, his little knobby knees buckled. He jumped so high, he lost his hat. And gave an uproarious chuckle. As they drove the sleigh toward the twinkling stars, away from the celebration of Christmas cheer, Santa leaned over to Fred the Elf and whispered in his ear. "Fred, I never wanted to disappoint you, or make you think I was unconcerned. But sometimes vanity can cloud our minds. And big lessons should be learned. I believe that God works through people. And He used me to help save you. Through the setback and heartache, you were changed and made new. Sometimes what blinds us must be stripped away. Then we see how much we're capable of. Selfishness and big egos aren't becoming. Instead, we should be filled with love." Santa's cheeks had never been so red, as he kissed him gently on his little elf head. He shouted, "Merry Christmas, dear Snowflake. Merry Christmas, my little Fred. And Merry Christmas to you."